I was the first to get the MS-01, and I won't be the last, but I will probably be the most comprehensive, because we're actually going to do 2 videos on this. One, this one, and then the other one on the Linux channel about home uses and Proxmox and some of the other stuff. But we're going to test the hardware in this one just so you know what you're getting into. So I don't have to rehash it in that one, because that one's mostly going to be about SR-IOV. The Minisforum MS-01, in case you're living under a rock, is a mini PC based around the Intel Core i9-13900H. And it's very special because it's got an expansion slot and built-in SFP plus 10 gigabit, plus dual 2.5 gig, plus Thunderbolt, plus lots of USB connectivity. But it's a mini PC. Alright, let's dive in and take a look. So what do you get in the box? Well, it depends on the configuration you order. You can order it bare bones so that you add your own storage and RAM, or you can get it with some other stuff built in. My shipping configuration is 2 16 gig sticks of memory and 1 terabyte of storage with the US power adapter. But you can get this thing with up to 64 gigs of DDR5 and 2 terabytes of storage. You can add your own storage after the fact. This thing will work with 96 gigabyte DIMMs. It looks unassuming. It looks like a small form factor business class Dell PC, but let's face it, Dell couldn't innovate. This is hardcore innovation. Okay, well, some of the HP mini PCs that have like their proprietary expansion module, that's kind of cool, I would concede, but this thing is pretty cool at the back. We've got dual 2.5 gig, we've got dual SFP plus 10 gig, dual USB 4, HDMI out, 2 10 gigabit type A USB ports, a 19 volt power input, and then at the front we've got our dual headphone microphone jack, another 10 gigabit port, and 2 USB 2.0 ports. Now the Type-C ports will also drive DisplayPort GPUs via the iGPU in our 13900H. There's also a half-height, half-length expansion slot. Yep. Now theoretically our 13900H is a 45 watt CPU, but in this configuration Minisforum will allow it to turbo for 115 watts. How long will it turbo for 115 watts? We'll put that to the test. The PCB in the Minisforum machine is designed such that there's so much physical room around your M.2 slot that you could put this M.2 in and then have a U.2 base, so you can run U.2 storage as well. Hey, home lab. Oh no, look what I have here. It's Kioxia storage. Kioxia storage just plops right onto that, and then we've got a U.2 storage and our MS-01. Yes. Yes. Now, why would you want to use a U.2 instead of an M.2? Well, the main one is capacity. It is physically a lot larger, and so at the 8 and 16 and 30 terabyte range, you can actually get 30 terabyte U.2. 30 terabyte M.2, not so much. I think 8 terabytes is where it tops out at, and you pay disproportionately more for an 8 terabyte M.2 than you do a 4. Whereas older 8 terabyte U.2 on eBay is like $50 to $75 a terabyte still. It's not going to be the fastest, but bulk storage. Alright, inside I can already see we've got a really smart layout. We have 2 unoccupied M.2 slots, and our boot drive is in the M.2 slot that you would have to use the adapter for. We've also got a nice fan in here for cooling the components that you might have in this area, which is great because these U.2 drives potentially are 25 watts, whereas an M.2 theoretically tops out at an absolute maximum of like 12 watts. Although Samsung drives have been known to use 15 watts through the M.2. A 15 watt M.2? Yeah, I know. Now, because this is Minisforum and a lot of people have used these for home lab type stuff in the past, sometimes home lab type cards can be a little squirrely. So I've got a Mellanox ConnectX-4 and ConnectX-5 25 gig card we're going to test, an LSI HBA and an LSI RAID controller. I've also got a Mellanox ConnectX-4, so we'll try some varieties of Mellanox ConnectX-4 and 5, and an Oculink breakout adapter. Yeah, so this is a half-height, half-length slot, but that doesn't mean that we can't bring our own power supply and bring our own X8 up to external expansion slot. I've also got some SFP Plus adapters. These are SFP Plus to copper. These use more power than is really meant to be used, and our Intel X710 on here, the reference design from Intel doesn't really take into account that you can have SFP Plus adapters like this that use as much power as they do. They're meant for fiber optics, and fiber optic SFP Plus adapters, or even passive copper cables like these, use much less power than these. These can overheat and they can damage the network card over time. and not run at 10 gigabit and have all sorts of problems. I've got a CompuFox and as well as a Finisar, and we're gonna try these and see how they work at 10 gigabit over the long haul, because things. Another fun thing that I'll mention, and that'll also be in the Linux video, is if you are building a cluster of these, if you get 3 of these, you can cross connect the 10 gig ports so that like this node would connect to the other 2 nodes, and each node of the 3 would have a physical direct connection to the other 2. That way you don't need a 10 gigabit switch. We've covered this type of wiring approach in the past, and this works really well with Proxmox, so that you can build a 3-node Proxmox cluster that has a high-speed 10 gigabit link. There, I just added 2 375 gig Optane M.2, and remember, they're gonna have active cooling. And on the other side, we'll add an LSI half-height, half-length HBA to connect to our external LSI disk shelf. You may remember the LSI disk shelf from such popular videos as helping out with Linus's NAS, and also then Linus discovered himself the NetApp shelves and all the glory that goes with them. So you just set one of these guys on top of a NetApp disk shelf, and you've got 6 performance cores and 8 efficiency cores powering your home storage appliance. And it is glorious. That will far outrun most of the things that you would buy commercially, even though it's made of, you know, not the Dell Enterprise storage stuff, but you'll still run circles around it, which is hilarious. It's great for labbing and testing and showing off to your colleagues, but that's so cool. All right, before I tear this down too much more, let's run through the normal use case. It's got Windows on it on this SSD before we get too far off the reservation. Now, for PCIe device compatibility testing, it is too much to get into. We've got a full guide on the Level 1 forum. ConnectX 5, ConnectX 4, is it the 25 gig version? Is it the 100 gig version? We're gonna try it all in this platform. I even got an RTX 4000 working. I think one of the things that Minisforum missed with this a little bit is that there are GPUs like this. This has 20 gigs of VRAM. The RTX 4000, this is great for running inferencing or large language models or anything like that in like a home server scenario. Imagine that you build a home assistant that you interact with via just talking to it, and you want it to run locally. This platform with a GPU like this can get it done. This platform with a bunch of extra storage, think about adding 4 or 5 external 20 terabyte hard drives for your home camera system. You can just talk to your home assistant and be like, hey Bob, if you see anybody in the yard today, let me know. Or, hey Bob, the yard people are going to be in the yard today, so don't worry about that. And maybe set the temperature lower or higher or whatever, because I'm not even going to be here for a couple of days. And you just talk to it, and the large language model runs, and this thing has 20 gigs of VRAM. This won't physically fit. You can mod the case and run it without a top, and it is almost, kind of, sort of going to fit, but not quite. It needs to be a little taller, so maybe Minisforum will do another version that'll hold 2 half-height, half-length cards. I can cheat a little bit because I've got a cable. I'm not going to mod my case, although I could. I'm also happy to report that both of our 10 gig to copper adapters work fine. It will help you if you add a pad that'll connect the SFP Plus housing to the metal housing on the case. It's a fairly involved disassembly, but if you get in here and you add a thermal pad to connect the SFP Plus to this metal plate here, that will help the cooling tremendously. Although the highest temperature that I saw, because of the active cooling that's floating around here in the bottom, was about 75 C. Be sure to check out the forum guide, because I'm sure we'll be adding and changing and updating stuff there now and in the future. Overall, this thing posts pretty impressive performance numbers. I was able to increase the PL1 value a little bit beyond 60 watts. The cooling here is top notch from Minisforum, or I just got a particularly good unit. I'm not really sure which. Do you really need to do that though in a home server type of scenario? The answer is basically not really. Your 6 performance cores could boost a little higher, but you've still only got 6 performance cores to start with, and you have 8 efficiency cores. Now, Linux is still getting patches around the Alder Lake P-core, E-core change that we saw. I mean, this is 13th gen, so, you know, not Alder Lake technically, sort of, kinda. But we do have P-cores and E-cores, and that is up to the Linux scheduler to decide how you're going to use that in the home lab scenario. Windows, of course, works great with P-cores and E-cores, and it's sized just right, 32 gigabytes. If you're going to use this as a Windows workstation, it does work fabulously well. If you're going to use this as a Windows workstation with graphics, the fact that this is pretty much the new standard for workstation graphics, meaning two slots, two half-height, half-length slots physically. You're not going to be able to put an RTX 4000 in here. It's too bad too, because 6 performance cores plus that really does make an incredible Windows workstation, because you get 4 full fat DisplayPort connections plus Thunderbolt plus 10 gig Ethernet. I mean, this is where it's at. Our memory latency is 96 nanoseconds, so it has a little bit of tuning. Hey, we've seen 120 nanoseconds on DDR5 5200, so 96 nanoseconds ain't bad. Subtimings are pretty good here. Similarly, our Geekbench scores are right where we would expect them to be on this Minisforum PC. Running Cinebench for 30 minutes, no thermal throttling or anything untoward showing in Hardware Info 64, at least before we add our PCIe peripherals. Is this platform fully compatible with Proxmox if you wanted to run it as a home server? Yes, it is. It works fine. There's no software problems. Not only that, the iGPU is compatible with SR-IOV. You get a virtual function, and you get a virtual function, and you get a virtual function. Everybody gets a virtual function. Now, the iGPU in this is still anemic. You're not going to magically get 7 times the GPU capacity. And when you take a wafer-thin slice of GPU capacity and slice it into more little slices, it doesn't add up to more GPU capacity. But if you want to run Plex Media Server and do some hardware transcoding and access the hardware transcoders inside a virtual machine under Proxmox, this will do that. The other thing we have to figure out is what prevents the system from booting, what doesn't prevent the system from booting. Minisforum does not have a great track record here supporting off-label uses because, well, you see, like this LSI RAID card, it has an EFI module and it has a CSM module, but a lot of the time when you plug in this kind of a card, it doesn't necessarily do a PCIe handshake. It can prevent the system from doing a post, it can prevent the system from doing boot, like you can get to the BIOS so you can see the BIOS screen, but then it never makes it any farther. So I didn't do exhaustive testing. Basically, I just wanted to check and see, will the system power on and will the system boot? And so there's a thread for that on the Level 1 forum. For most of the devices that I have here, it is possible to find combinations of hardware that will work. That means that your mileage may vary, but with the caveat that historically Minisforum hasn't been super on the ball updating the BIOS. In terms of downsides of this platform, there's really a couple if you're going to use it for the home lab use case, and really this only applies to the home lab use case. For the small workstation use case, it matters less. The first downside is that your U.2 slot, you don't have 15 millimeters of clearance. You've got like 7 to 9. It would be nice to have had 15 millimeters of clearance because you do have room for 110 millimeter M.2. Your M.2, as I mentioned before, X4 and X2 lanes, PCIe Gen 3. You've got the one M.2 that can be a U.2, that can be PCIe Gen 4, but cycling between Micron, Kioxia, and Samsung M.2 PCIe Gen 4, your mileage is going to vary a little bit on what actually works with PCIe Gen 4. I was seeing a few PCIe bus errors on some of those in some circumstances. It seemed to improve if I could actually get the case on. Now for our Kioxia CD5, the case won't physically fit because it's super tall, but it does work anyway. Overall, I would give this thing an A-. This is definitely solidly a step in the right direction for Minisforum, and if you're into SR-IOV, be sure to check out our Linux channel video on the Flex 170 SR-IOV, but it's the same how-to basically to get SR-IOV up and running with the iGPU on this, so be sure to check that out on the Linux forum. I'm Wendell, this is Level 1. If I missed anything or you want me to check out anything else in particular with the MS-01 Mini Workstation from Minisforum, let me know. Link below, check that out. Let them know that you're interested. Even if they miss the mark, it's like, I would buy this, but let me know. That's useful. All right, I'm signing out. I'll see you in the forum.